For more than half a century, one piece of film footage has occupied a stranger position in American culture than almost any other visual document ever recorded. It runs for less than 60 seconds, 954 frames to be exact, shot on a hand-cranked Kodak camera loaded with Kodachrome 2 film. It is grainy, shaky, and captured by two men on horseback in the forests of Northern California. And yet, the Patterson-Gimlin film, shot on October 20th, 1967 along Bluff Creek in Humboldt County, remains the single most analyzed, most argued over, most technically dissected piece of cryptozoological evidence in existence. Footage that supposedly shows a large, muscular, dark-haired bipedal figure, estimated at 6 to 7 feet tall, striding across a dry creek bed before pausing to glance back over its shoulder at the camera. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin always maintained the footage was real. Patterson, a filmmaker from Yakima, Washington, who had already produced a low-budget documentary about the search for the creature some years earlier and self-published a book asking whether abominable snowmen of America really existed, died of Hodgkin lymphoma in 1972, still insisting he had filmed a living, unknown animal. Gimlin, a rodeo rider and logger who rode into the Six Rivers National Forest with Patterson that day, continued, saying the same thing for the rest of his long life. And in the decades since, the film has been picked apart, frame by anatomists, special effects artists, forensic analysts, and hoax suit historians, none of whom have ever fully agreed on what it shows. Recently, a wave of online interest has centered on something that feels new: people running the original footage through AI-based video upscaling and enhancement tools, including xAI's Grok, to see whether modern machine learning could finally resolve details. The original film's resolution never could. The pitch is intuitive and appealing. If AI can sharpen old photographs, colorize black and white film, and reconstruct blurry security footage into recognizable faces, surely it could do the same for 57-year-old cryptid footage and settle the debate once and for all. Videos with titles like Grok AI finally reveals what's hidden in the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film have circulated with dramatic claims that an AI model examined a specific frame pixel by pixel, searched for the seam of a mask, and returned a verdict of unidentified biological organism. It's worth being very direct about what's actually happening in these videos and about what AI enhancement tools can and cannot do, because it matters enormously to how seriously any resulting images or claims should be taken. It also matters because, as it happens, an entirely separate and far more consequential development in the Patterson-Gimlin story arrived in the same general window of time as these AI enhancement videos began circulating. A development built not on machine learning applied to old pixels, but on an old film canister that had been sitting untouched in a locked safe for decades. The contrast between those two kinds of revelation turns out to be the most instructive part of the entire story. Generative AI upscaling models, the kind used to enhance old or low-resolution footage, do not recover information that was never captured by the camera in the first place. A 1967 16mm film frame has a fixed, finite amount of real visual information in it. Grain, contrast, motion blur, and whatever the lens and film stock physically captured under the lighting conditions of that particular afternoon. No software, however sophisticated, can extract detail that simply isn't there. This is not a limitation specific to any one company's model. It's a basic constraint of information theory. You cannot get more true information out of a signal than the signal actually contains. What these tools do instead is generate plausible-looking detail. Models used for this kind of enhancement, whether it's Grok's video tools, Topaz Video AI, or various diffusion-based upscalers, are trained on enormous datasets of real images. When asked to fill in a blurry patch, they predict what a higher resolution version of that patch would probably look like, based on statistical patterns learned from millions of other images, not based on any actual information hidden in the original pixels. If you ask an AI upscaler to sharpen a blurry human face, it will produce a face because that's what its training data says. Blurry patches near face. Shaped regions usually resolve into. Feed it a blurry patch where a hoax suit's fur seam, a shadow, or simple film grain sits, and it will still confidently generate texture, fold lines, and shading that look like detailed fur or skin, because generating a smooth, plausible-looking result is what these models are optimized to do, regardless of whether that result reflects anything that was physically present in front of the camera in 1967. This is why AI-enhanced or AI-stabilized versions of the Patterson-Gimlin footage that circulate online often look startlingly crisp compared to the original, and why that crispness should make viewers more skeptical, not less. This isn't a new phenomenon either. Stabilized and grained versions of the footage using AI tools began circulating widely as early as 2023, when a well-known AI commentator posted a smoothed, sharpened version of the clip that removed most of the handheld camera shake. To many who watched it, the stabilized version looked considerably more like a person walking in a costume, largely because removing the shake and grain removes some of the ambiguity that made the original footage hard to parse in the first place, not because the AI revealed some previously invisible truth. Whatever a viewer already believed about the footage, the stabilized version tended to confirm it, which is itself a useful signal about how much genuine new information these enhancements are actually adding. More recent videos have gone considerably further than simple stabilization, claiming that an AI model was tasked with searching a specific frame 3 of 52 in one widely shared example, for the physical seam where a mask would meet human skin, examining the brow, jawline, hairline, and throat under different lighting models, and returning a dramatic forward verdict along the lines of unidentified biological organism. It's worth being plain about this. This is not how any publicly available AI vision system actually works, and it is not a credible description of an actual analytical process. It reads like, and functions as, a scripted narrative device for a video, dressed in the language of scientific procedure to make a predetermined, attention-grabbing conclusion sound like the output of rigorous machine analysis. Real computer vision systems don't produce verdicts like unidentified biological organism. That phrase is written for a human audience, not generated by a model examining pixel data. AI enhancement of this footage cannot, in principle, tell you anything true about whether the original subject was a man in a costume or an unknown primate, because the tool is filling gaps with statistically likely imagery, not with the actual optical information the camera lens registered on that October afternoon. And it certainly isn't handing down definitive verdicts about biology. It's also worth noting how formulaic this genre of video has become because the formula itself is a tell. The structure is almost always identical, regardless of the subject matter. A claim that some highest resolution scan ever produced has just been obtained, a description of the AI being instructed to search for one specific, decisive physical detail, and then a short, quotable, dramatic verdict rendered in a tone that borrows the authority of a lab report while disclosing none of a lab report's actual substance. No dataset, no confidence interval, no method anyone else could reproduce. That structure works precisely because it is designed to be shared rather than checked. The genuine forensic history of the Patterson-Gimlin film is considerably more interesting than any AI-generated gloss, largely because it involves real, falsifiable methods applied by people with relevant expertise, arguing an ongoing and often contentious case in public over the course of decades. Bill Munns, a special effects artist with decades of experience building creature suits and prosthetics for Hollywood, spent years conducting a frame-by-frame study of the footage, examining musculature, joint, movement, and the mechanics of the figure's gait. His conclusion, published in a lengthy technical report, was that he could not identify the figure as a known costume design from that era, though he stopped short of concluding it was necessarily a genuine unknown animal. Munns has remained one of the most visible and persistent defenders of the footage's authenticity in the years since, arguing repeatedly that the special effects, technology and materials available to an amateur filmmaker in rural Washington state in 1967 could not plausibly have produced the muscle definition and compliant movement visible in the film. On the other side, in 2002, a man named Bob Hieronymus came forward, claiming he was the person inside a costume that day, asserting Patterson had commissioned a gorilla-style suit from a costume company and asked him to walk across the sandbar for the film. Journalist Greg Long documented this claim at length in his book The Making of Bigfoot, tracing purchase records and interviews that Long argued supported the hoax explanation. Critics of Hieronymus's account have long pointed out that no physical suit was ever produced to corroborate his claim, and that his story shifted in certain details across different tellings, a gap that kept the debate unresolved for another 2 decades. Anatomists have weighed in on both sides of the gait analysis, some examining the figure's arm-to-leg ratio, apparent muscle definition through the buttocks and calf during mid-stride, and the compliant, non-rigid movement of what would be a costume's fabric, have argued the figure's biomechanics are difficult to replicate with 1967-era costume technology. Others have pointed out that a tall man in a loose-fitting fur suit, walking with an exaggerated, deliberately stiff-legged gait, produces a very similar visual signature, and that film analysts have successfully reproduced comparable movement with modern costume reconstructions. The famous sagittal crest, a ridge along the top of the head visible in some frames, associated in real anatomy with a bony crest found in gorillas and some other primates for jaw muscle attachment, has been one of the most argued over single details in the entire film. Proponents say it's inconsistent with a human head shape under a costume hood. Skeptics say it's consistent with a hood simply bunching or an ill-fitting mask design. In 1999, one researcher, himself a believer in the creature's existence, claimed to have identified what looked like a fastener or belt buckle at the figure's waist after blowing up individual frames, a detail that has never been satisfactorily explained by either side of the debate, and that remains one of the more genuinely puzzling small pieces of physical evidence in the footage. None of this had ever been resolved to general consensus for nearly 6 decades, which was itself the most honest thing that could be said about the film after 57 years of study by people taking it seriously from multiple directions. That, however, may finally be changing, and not because of anything an AI model produced. In March 2026, a documentary called Capturing Bigfoot, directed by Mark Evans, premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival, and it landed like a genuine bombshell in the Cryptid research community. The origin of the film's central discovery traces back to June 2022, when Teresa Brooks, a film instructor at Olympic College in Washington State, found a sealed 16mm film canister in a safe belonging to her late father, Norm Johnson. Johnson had worked in a Boeing film processing lab during the years. The Patterson-Gimlin footage was made and was personally connected to Patterson and Gimlin through his brother. The rehearsal footage, roughly 40 seconds long, appears to show a costumed, somewhat skinnier figure walking through a wooded area strikingly similar to the later Bluff Creek. Footage, with Bob Gimlin visible on horseback in the frame, suggesting a level of premeditated planning that directly contradicts the chance encounter story Patterson and Gimlin told for the rest of their lives. According to the documentary, a different man, sometimes identified in coverage of the film as Datley, wore the suit in this earlier test footage, which is part of why the figure in it appears slighter than the one seen in the final 1967 film. Perhaps more strikingly, the documentary includes extensive testimony from Clint Patterson, Roger Patterson's own son, who was 12 years old when his father died, and who spent much of his adult life still processing what he calls a kind of repeated loss of his childhood hero. Clint says he learned from his mother, Patricia Patterson, roughly a decade before the documentary was made, that the famous footage had in fact been staged, a revelation that reportedly weighed on him for years, in part because he says he considered writing a tell-all book about it, and was, by his own account, disowned by his mother over concerns about the loss of the family's income from Bigfoot-related appearances and licensing, before ultimately participating in Evans's film instead. The documentary also touches on the personal toll the footage took more broadly, a decades-long rift between Patricia Patterson and Bob Hieronymus, once childhood friends, that the filmmakers say the process of making Capturing Bigfoot helped begin to repair. Reactions to the film's premiere have been notably mixed, and that mixture is itself worth taking seriously rather than smoothing over. Several outlets covering the SXSW premiere described the documentary in near-conclusive terms, with one trade publication calling it the definitive account of the Patterson-Gimlin story and reporting that even long-committed believers in the film's authenticity, including Munns himself, struggled to fully absorb the new material. But not every response has treated the new footage as settled proof. At least one independent research outlet focused specifically on the documentary has argued that the newly surfaced reel has never been independently forensically dated, that no attempt was publicly demonstrated to match its film stock or camera characteristics to Patterson's known equipment, and that the chain of custody for the canister sealed in. A private safe for decades before reaching a documentary filmmaker rather than a lab or archive leaves real, unresolved evidentiary gaps of its own. It's a genuinely remarkable turn in a story that spent nearly 60 years as an open question either way, and it underscores something important for this whole conversation. The piece of evidence capable of actually moving this debate forward, for or against, was never going to be an AI-generated image pulled from an old, blurry frame. It was always going to be something like this instead: a second physical film reel, a family member's direct, on-camera account, and the ordinary tools of documentary journalism and archival research applied to both. The core evidentiary issue with the Patterson-Gimlin film was never really about resolution. It was about the impossibility of independently verifying a single, uncorroborated piece of footage of a purported unknown species, shot by two men with an established financial interest in the footage's authenticity. Patterson and Gimlin formed a formal partnership called Bigfoot Enterprises just 12 days after filming, together with a third investor who had helped fund the expedition, and Patterson subsequently toured the footage across theaters and venues nationwide, earning substantial revenue from ticket sales and appearances, with no physical remains, no repeatable observation, and no corroborating evidence beyond a single trackway of large footprints at the same site, whose authenticity has been separately disputed for decades. AI upscaling doesn't touch any of that. It can't verify chain of custody. It can't determine whether Hieronymus' account, Clint Patterson's account, or the original Patterson-Gimlin account is the true one. It can't authenticate a sealed film canister found in a family safe 56 years after the fact. And it can't recover ground truth from a moving 16mm frame that was, at the time of filming, roughly 20 to 40 feet from the camera and subject to all the grain, motion blur, and compression that entails. What it can do is generate a more visually satisfying, more detailed version of an image that scratches the same psychological itch that has made this footage endlessly compelling since 1967. The desire to finally see clearly, to have the machine simply tell us what we're looking at. That desire is understandable, and it explains why an entire recognizable genre of online video has grown up around it. The AI finally reveals the truth about mystery format, applied not just to Bigfoot, but to UFO, footage, unsolved disappearances, and historical photographs. These videos follow a familiar structure. An AI tool is described as being fed the highest resolution scan ever produced, instructed to search for some decisive physical detail, and returning a dramatic, quotable verdict. It's a compelling narrative structure precisely because it borrows the language and authority of scientific procedure while skipping the actual scientific work, the peer review, the disclosed methodology, the reproducibility by other researchers, the willingness to be wrong. There is a useful comparison to be made here between two entirely different kinds of new evidence, both of which arrived in roughly the same period and both of which were marketed in their respective corners of the internet as finally answering the Patterson-Gimlin question. One is a sealed film canister, sitting untouched for decades, that surfaced through an ordinary and traceable chain of human events. A woman cleaning out her late father's belongings, a phone call to a documentary filmmaker she happened to know, months of careful digitization and cross-referencing against archival material, and a finished film that other journalists, researchers, and skeptics have now had the opportunity to pick apart in public, which is exactly what has already begun happening. The Patterson-Gimlin film occupies a strange, durable place in American culture precisely because it sits at the edge of what a single ambiguous piece of visual evidence can and cannot tell us. For nearly 6 decades, that ambiguity was the whole story, and both Patterson and Gimlin maintained their account. For the rest of their lives, which struck many researchers as strong evidence in itself, given the apparent absence of an ongoing financial motive, strong enough to sustain a lifelong lie, that the answer may finally be arriving now, in 2026, is coming from exactly the kind of evidence that was always going to be capable of resolving it, if anything ever could. An old family member's direct account and a second piece of film footage documenting the planning stages that the original story explicitly denied ever took place. Evidence that is itself now being subjected to exactly the kind of public scrutiny, skepticism, and demand for independent forensic dating that any serious claim of this magnitude should have to survive. An AI-enhanced version of the footage showing crisper detail by contrast is not new evidence, no matter how the video presenting it is framed. It's a new image, generated by a model trained to produce plausible-looking output, laid over a question that, as of 2026, may finally be getting resolved or at least seriously reframed by entirely conventional means. A documentary filmmaker, an old safe, a piece of test footage, and a son willing to talk about what his mother told him on camera decades after the fact. Anyone presenting AI upscaling as having found something new in the 60-year-old footage itself is describing what the tool is designed to look like doing, not what it is actually capable of doing. And, as it turns out, not what actually moved this decades-old case forward, however that case ultimately settles.